A waitress saved a Hells Angels member's son from kidnappers. Then 200 bikers made her their queen. The screaming pierced the Las Vegas night like broken glass. Angela Thompson froze mid-wipe, coffee-stained rag dropping from her hands as she watched an 8-year-old boy sprint across the Desert Rose Diner's parking lot. 2 grown men in relentless pursuit behind him. Kidnapping was happening right outside her door. At 30, Angie worked triple shifts to escape her abusive ex-husband and support Tommy, 9, and Sarah, 6, alone. The overnight diner shift paid barely enough for their sketchy apartment rent. But it was honest work in a city that chewed up single mothers and spit them out broken. But what she didn't know was that her split-second decision to protect a terrified child would catapult her from struggling waitress to protected family member of the most powerful motorcycle club in Nevada, and ultimately lead to finding the love and security she'd never dared to dream possible. Desert Rose Diner sat on the edge of Las Vegas, like a forgotten oasis, its neon sign flickering pink against the endless Nevada desert. The 24-hour establishment served truckers, casino workers getting off late shifts, and the occasional tourist who'd taken a wrong turn looking for the strip at 2:00 a.m. The place was nearly empty, except for the occasional insomniac seeking coffee and pie. The diner occupied dangerous territory close enough to the city for business, far enough out for privacy that made it attractive to people conducting affairs they preferred to keep quiet. Angie had learned to read the clientele, who was safe, who might cause trouble, who tipped well, and who stiffed her. The parking lot was poorly lit, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned buildings that made it feel isolated, despite the distant glow of casino lights on the horizon. She'd chosen this job specifically because it paid cash daily and didn't ask too many questions about her bruised past. Angie's defining trauma came from 3 years of marriage to Marcus Weber, a construction worker whose drinking transformed him into a monster. The final beating had sent her to the emergency room with broken ribs and a concussion, while Tommy watched from the closet where she'd hidden him that night. She grabbed the children and ran with nothing but the clothes on their backs and $200 from a coffee can hidden in the garage. The divorce had been ugly, with Marcus threatening to kill her if she ever tried to take his kids away. The restraining order was just paper against a man who knew where she worked. Life post-divorce was a constant struggle for survival. Angie worked at the diner from midnight to 8:00 a.m., cleaned offices from 10:00 a.m. to 2:00 p.m., and babysat neighbors' children in the evenings to make ends meet. Tommy and Sarah stayed with Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly neighbor, during her night shifts, sleeping on her couch because Angie couldn't afford childcare. Their apartment in a rundown complex was the best she could manage. 1 bedroom where the kids slept while she took the living room couch. Every day was about stretching dollars and avoiding her ex-husband's sporadic attempts at reconciliation that usually involved threats. Despite her exhaustion and fear, Angie possessed fierce protective instincts honed by years of shielding her children from violence. She could read danger signs immediately, the way someone held their shoulders when angry, the particular silence that preceded an explosion, the body language of predators sizing up prey. Her survival skills included always knowing exit routes, keeping cash hidden in multiple places, and maintaining hypervigilance that exhausted her, but kept her family safe. What made her special wasn't just her courage, but her inability to ignore a child in danger. Even when helping meant risking her own safety and stability, Angie's central struggle was surviving as a single mother while protecting her children from both poverty and their violent father. Every decision carried life-altering weight. Take on extra shifts and leave the kids alone longer, or work less and risk eviction. Report Marcus's violations of the restraining order and escalate his anger, or stay silent and hope he lost interest. The deeper conflict was trust. Her marriage had taught her that protection was temporary, that people who claimed to love you could become your greatest threat. She'd built walls around herself and her children, that made forming new relationships nearly impossible, even when isolation left her vulnerable. Her hypervigilance necessary for survival made it difficult to distinguish between genuine threats and normal interactions. Every knock on the door, every unexpected phone call, every unfamiliar car in the parking lot triggered fight-or-flight responses that left her emotionally drained and her children walking on eggshells around her anxiety. But fate was about to test every survival instinct she'd developed, placing her in a situation where protecting one terrified child would either destroy her carefully built safety or transform her entire world in ways she never imagined possible. The child's scream cut through the desert silence like a blade. Angie's head snapped up from the cash register she'd been counting. Her survival instincts immediately engaged. Through the diner's front window, she could see a small figure sprinting across the parking lot under the flickering streetlight. A boy, maybe 8 years old, running with the desperate speed of pure terror behind him. Two adult men gave chase with the methodical pace of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to go. One was speaking into a cell phone while running, coordinating something that made Angie's blood run cold. Every maternal instinct in her body screamed action, but her survival training urged caution. Getting involved meant exposure, attention, potential danger to her own children. But the boy was Danny's age, close to Tommy's size, and his panic was genuine. No child faked that level of terror. The pursuers weren't police, no uniforms, no badges visible, and their body language spoke of violence rather than law enforcement. This was predatory behavior, and that child was running for his life. Angie's decision crystallized as the boy reached the diner's front door and began pounding on the glass with small fists while looking over his shoulder in absolute panic. Whatever her own risks, owns. She couldn't let a child be taken by force right in front of her. Angie's survival instincts kicked in as she analyzed the situation. The diner had 2 exits, front door and kitchen back door, plus the storage room that connected to the building's basement. If she let the boy in, she needed defensible positions and escape routes. She grabbed the cordless phone and the heavy iron skillet she kept behind the counter for protection. Living in a dangerous neighborhood had taught her to prepare for trouble. "Help me, please!" The boy screamed through the glass, his voice cracking with terror. "They're going to take me!" Angie made her choice. She unlocked the front door and yanked the boy inside immediately, relocking it and activating the deadbolt. The child collapsed against her, sobbing and shaking. "What's your name, honey?" she asked, already moving him toward the kitchen. "I'm Angie. You're safe now." "Danny?" he gasped. "Danny Jackson. My dad is Hammer. He's with the Hells Angels. Those men grabbed me at the park. They said they'd kill my dad if I didn't come with them." Angie's blood chilled. Hells Angels meant this wasn't random. This was organized crime, rival gangs, the kind of violence that left bodies in the desert. But it also meant Danny's father had resources to fight back, if he knew where to find his son. The 2 men had reached the front door and were testing the handle, their faces visible through the glass. Cold. "Professional. Dangerous. We know you're in there," one of the men shouted, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Send the kid out and nobody gets hurt." Angie pulled Danny toward the kitchen, her mind racing through options. Call 911. But police response time in this area was notoriously slow, and these men looked like they had contingency plans. Try to call Danny's father, but she had no contact information and no time to find it. "My dad always said if something bad happened, find somewhere safe and wait for him," Danny whispered, clinging to her arm. "He said he'd find me no matter what." The men were examining the front door lock, and one was walking around the building, probably looking for other entrances. Angie guided Danny to the storage room and dialed 911, but kept her voice low. "This is Angela Thompson at Desert Rose Diner on Highway 95. Two men are trying to break in and kidnap a child. Send police immediately. Through the kitchen window, she could see one of the men trying the back door. They were professionals, systematic, patient, covering all exits. This wasn't panic or impulse. This was a planned operation. But as the kidnappers began systematically testing every entrance to the diner, Angie had no idea that 20 miles away, the most feared motorcycle club in Nevada was getting word that someone had taken their family and was about to descend like a storm of leather and steel. The kidnappers weren't leaving. One maintained watch at the front, while the other circled the building, testing windows and looking for weak points. Angie realized they were establishing a perimeter, settling in for a siege rather than attempting immediate forced entry. Her 911 call had bought time, but these men seemed unconcerned about police response. Either they were confident in their timing or had inside information about law enforcement response in this area. Danny was shaking uncontrollably, whispering details about how they grabbed him from the playground near his school. This was personal, targeted, part of something bigger than random kidnapping. "Listen, lady, this doesn't concern you," the lead kidnapper called through the door. "We just want the kid. Make this easy on yourself and open up." His tone carried implied threats. Angie had heard similar voices from her ex-husband when he wanted to sound reasonable before exploding into violence. Through the window, she could see the second man producing tools from their vehicle, preparing for forced entry. They'd moved from persuasion to action, meaning their timeline was accelerating. Danny was hyperventilating, the stress triggering what looked like a panic attack in an 8-year-old boy who'd probably never experienced real danger before tonight. The sound of breaking glass came from the bathroom window. They'd found a weakness. Angie grabbed the iron skillet and positioned herself between Danny and the sounds of entry, her maternal instincts overriding survival caution. She'd fought off Marcus when he was drunk and violent. She could fight off strangers trying to hurt a child. But these weren't domestic abusers operating in emotional fury. These were professionals with weapons and experience. The basement storage room suddenly seemed like their only option. But that meant trapping themselves with no escape route if the situation deteriorated further. Through the desert silence, a new sound emerged. The distinctive rumble of multiple motorcycle engines approaching at high speed. Danny's head snapped up from where he'd been crying against Angie's shoulder. "That's them," he whispered with desperate hope. "That's my dad's bike." The sound grew louder, more engines joining the chorus, until it became a mechanical thunder that seemed to shake the diner's windows. Angie could see headlights approaching from multiple directions, not just one or two bikes, but what sounded like an entire convoy. The kidnappers heard it too, through the front window. She watched them exchange urgent looks and rapid hand signals. Their confidence was evaporating as the motorcycle engines grew closer, and she could see them reassessing their situation against what was clearly overwhelming force approaching. "That's the whole chapter," one said to the other, his voice carrying panic for the first time. "How did they find us so fast?" The lead kidnapper was speaking rapidly into his phone, probably requesting backup or extraction, but the motorcycle engines were too close now. Whatever timeline they'd been operating under had just collapsed, and Angie realized the dynamic was about to shift dramatically in ways that might be dangerous for everyone in the vicinity. For the first time since leaving Marcus, Angie felt genuinely powerful rather than merely surviving. Protecting Danny had awakened something she'd thought her ex-husband had killed: the ability to fight for others rather than just endure for herself. She wasn't cowering or calculating escape routes. She was actively defending territory and an innocent child. Her hands had stopped shaking, replaced by the steady grip of someone prepared to use the iron skillet as a weapon. The hypervigilance that exhausted her in normal life was an asset here, allowing her to track both kidnappers' positions while monitoring Danny's emotional state and listening for approaching help. Most importantly, she realized that her children needed to see her as someone who fought for what was right, not just someone who ran from what was wrong. Tommy and Sarah deserved a mother who stood up to bullies, not one who taught them that survival meant accepting abuse. Danny's trust in her, the way he'd instinctively sought her protection and now looked at her like she was capable of keeping him safe, reminded Angie of her own strength. She'd survived 3 years of marriage to a violent man and protected her children through it all. 2 kidnappers were just another kind of predator, and she knew how to handle predators. The motorcycle engines were close enough now that Angie could distinguish individual bikes, at least 15, maybe 20, all arriving with military precision that suggested coordination and experience. But that many bikers responding to a kidnapping meant this wasn't just about Danny. This was about territory, respect, and the kind of organized retaliation that left lasting scars on anyone involved. Through the front window, she could see the kidnappers making rapid decisions about whether to cut their losses or try to complete their mission before the cavalry arrived. Their body language suggested they were weighing the value of taking Danny against the cost of fighting an entire motorcycle club. One was still speaking urgently into his phone, probably with someone who was giving orders about how to proceed. The other had drawn a weapon the first time Angie had seen guns in the situation, escalating the danger exponentially. Danny pressed closer to her. "My dad's going to be so mad," he whispered. "When Hammer gets mad, people get hurt real bad." The approaching engines were slowing, which meant the bikers were taking tactical positions rather than just racing to the rescue. This was about to become a confrontation between organized forces, and Angie was caught in the middle with a terrified child. And then everything exploded into chaos as 20 Harley-Davidsons roared into the parking lot with the fury of a mechanized war party. And Angie realized she was about to witness what happened when someone made the fatal mistake of threatening a Hells Angels family. The parking lot transformed into a war zone as 23 Harley-Davidsons surrounded the diner with military precision. Angie watched through the front window as leather-clad bikers dismounted and took positions that blocked every possible escape route for the kidnappers. These weren't weekend warriors or costume bikers. These were serious men with serious weapons and decades of experience handling serious problems. The lead rider, a massive figure who had to be Danny's father, didn't even wait for his bike to fully stop before dismounting and striding toward the diner with purposeful rage. "Hammer's here!" Danny screamed with relief. But Angie felt a chill of recognition. She'd seen that particular walk before. The measured advance of someone about to commit violence with professional efficiency. "Get away from my son!" Hammer's voice carried across the desert like a war cry, and even through the diner's walls. The sound made everyone freeze. The kidnappers had drawn weapons now, but they were outnumbered 20-2 by men who'd been in actual combat rather than just criminal operations. Steele Rodriguez, the chapter president, positioned himself where he could see both kidnappers while speaking into a radio. "Nobody leaves until this gets resolved." His voice carried authority that came from years of making life or death decisions. "You picked the wrong kid to while with." The standoff crystallized around a simple reality. The kidnappers could surrender and face whatever justice the bikers decided to dispense, or they could fight and face certain death. But there was a third option that made Angie's blood run cold. They could try to use Danny as a human shield, which meant getting him out of the diner first. The lead kidnapper was speaking rapidly into his phone, probably with someone giving orders about how to extract maximum value from a deteriorating situation. Angie caught fragments of his conversation. "Whole chapter here, kids inside. Extraction impossible." Through the kitchen window, she could see bikers taking positions with the disciplined spacing of people who'd done this before. But she also noticed something terrifying. The second kidnapper was no longer visible, which meant he was trying to find another way into the building, while his partner kept everyone's attention focused on the front. "Danny, we need to move," she whispered. guiding him toward the storage room. "Your dad's here, but we need to stay safe until the crash of breaking glass from the bathroom confirmed her worst fear." The second kidnapper had found entry while everyone was focused on the standoff outside. She could hear footsteps moving through the diner, methodical and predatory. Angie faced an impossible choice: stay in the storage room and hope the flimsy lock would hold against a determined adult, or move toward the front of the diner where Danny's father could see them, but where they'd be exposed to the armed kidnapper now inside the building. Danny was hyperventilating again, his small body shaking with terror that was affecting his ability to think clearly. "I want my dad," he whispered, and Angie realized that an 8-year-old's courage had limits that adult desperation didn't. The footsteps were getting closer, accompanied by the soft sound of someone systematically checking hiding places. In moments, their location would be discovered, and Angie would have to choose between fighting a trained criminal with kitchen implements or surrendering Danny to people who'd already demonstrated willingness to hurt children. Angie made her decision based on maternal instinct rather than tactical thinking. She grabbed the iron skillet and positioned herself between Danny and the storage room door, ready to fight with everything she had rather than let him be taken. "Danny, when I say run, you go straight to the front door where your dad can see you," she whispered. "Don't look back. Don't stop. Just run to your father." The storage room door handle turned slowly, and Angie raised the skillet with both hands. She'd never been in a real fight except with Marcus, but those experiences had taught her that hesitation meant worse consequences than action. The door opened, and she swung with all her strength, catching the kidnapper across the temple with a heavy iron. He staggered but didn't fall, his training keeping him functional despite the impact. "Run!" she screamed to Danny, who bolted past the stunned kidnapper toward the front of the diner. The man recovered faster than she'd hoped, grabbing her wrist and twisting until she dropped the skillet. But Danny was visible now through the front window, and the sound that erupted from the parking lot was unlike anything Angie had ever heard. Pure parental fury, amplified by 23 voices. Now everything depended on whether a 140-club waitress could hold off a professional kidnapper long enough for the most dangerous motorcycle club in Nevada to breach the building and rescue the child who'd become her responsibility in this moment of absolute chaos. The moment Danny appeared in the front window, visible to his father for the first time since the nightmare began, the entire dynamic shifted. Hammer's roar of recognition and relief echoed across the parking lot, followed immediately by the sound of multiple men moving with coordinated purpose. Angie was grappling with a kidnapper in the storage room doorway, both fighting for control of the situation, but for entirely different stakes. He needed Danny to complete his mission and probably escape alive, while she needed to keep him away from the child for just a few more seconds until help arrived. "Let him go and you can walk away," the kidnapper hissed. But his words lacked conviction. Even he could hear the sound of the diner's front door being forced open, followed by heavy boots moving through the building with military precision. Through the kitchen, Angie could hear Steele's voice giving orders. "Secure the kid first. Then we deal with these. Njom. Nobody gets creative. We do this clean." The kidnapper's grip on her wrist tightened, desperation making him stronger. But Angie could hear Danny's voice calling for his father and knew the child was safe now. Her job was almost finished. "Federal agents, nobody move." The shout came from outside, adding a new element to an already chaotic situation. Through the storage room's small window, Angie could see unmarked vehicles arriving, their occupants taking positions around the perimeter that the bikers had established. The kidnapper cursed and released her wrist, apparently recognizing that federal involvement changed the entire game. "This isn't over," he warned. But his retreat toward the bathroom window suggested otherwise. Angie stumbled out of the storage room as massive figures in leather filled the kitchen. The first one threw unmistakably Hammer based on his size, and the desperate relief on his face immediately focused on his son. "Daddy!" Danny launched himself into his father's arms with the complete trust of a child who'd never doubted his rescue would come. "I got you, boy." Hammer's voice broke as he lifted Danny, his massive hands gentle despite their capacity for violence. "Nobody's ever going to hurt you again." But Steele was already coordinating with the federal agents, suggesting this kidnapping was part of something larger. "These aren't random criminals," he told the lead agent. "Somebody put them up to this." The diner filled with controlled chaos as federal agents, bikers, and local police all converged on the scene. The kidnapper Angie had fought was attempting to escape through the bathroom window when two bikers grabbed him and hauled him back inside with efficiency that suggested extensive experience in preventing escapes. "Ma'am, are you injured?" Agent Sarah Martinez approached Angie with professional concern, while other agents secured the crime scene. "We need to debrief you about what happened here." Angie was shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off, but her focus remained on Danny, who was still clinging to his father like his life depended on it. "Is he okay? Did they hurt him?" Hammer approached with Danny still in his arms, the child's arms wrapped around his father's neck. "Miss, I don't know your name, but you saved my son's life tonight." "Angie," she managed. "Angela Thompson. I couldn't let them take him." Agent Martinez was taking notes rapidly. "Ms. Thompson, these men are part of a trafficking operation that's been targeting children of specific individuals. This wasn't random. Someone specifically ordered the kidnapping of Danny Jackson." The implications hit Angie like a physical blow. Danny hadn't just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He'd been specifically targeted because of who his father was. That meant professional criminals, organized crime, the kind of enemies who didn't forget or forgive. "They mentioned something about sending a message," she told the agent. "One of them said they'd kill his father if Danny didn't cooperate." Steele stepped forward, his face grim. "It's the Scorpions' rival club from California. They've been trying to move into our territory for months. Taking Hammer's boy was supposed to be their opening move." Agent Martinez nodded. "We've been tracking their expansion eastward. What they didn't expect was someone like you getting involved and disrupting their timeline." Angie realized that by saving Danny, she'd inserted herself into a conflict much larger and more dangerous than a simple kidnapping. These people now knew who she was, where she worked, and that she cost them their operation. "M. Thompson," Steele said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life or death decisions. "You saved one of ours tonight. That makes you family, whether you want it or not." Angie looked around at the leather-clad men filling her workplace, trying to process what that meant. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Hammer interrupted, still holding Danny. "You did what a warrior does. You saw a child in danger, and you fought for him against armed men who could have killed you." Agent Martinez cleared her throat. "Ma'am, I need to inform you that your involvement in this incident may have put you at risk of retaliation. These organizations have long memories and significant resources." The weight of that statement settled on Angie like a physical burden. She'd saved Danny, but potentially endangered Tommy and Sarah in the process. Her protective actions might have painted a target on her own children, but Steele continued, "We protect our family. You stood up for Danny when he needed it most, and now we stand up for you and your kids." Danny lifted his head from his father's shoulder. "She was really brave, Dad. She hit the bad man with a pan and told me to run to you." Hammer's eyes filled with tears as he looked at Angie. "Lady, I owe you everything. My son, my sanity, my world. You saved it all tonight." Agent Martinez finished her initial interview and stepped aside as Steele approached Angie with something that looked like a formal proposal. "Angela Thompson, By unanimous vote of the Las Vegas chapter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, you are hereby offered full protection and support. What does that mean? Angie asked, overwhelmed by the night's events and their apparent consequences. It means, Hammer explained, that anyone who messes with you or your kids answers to all of us. It means you've got 23 brothers who will ride through hell to help you. It means you're not alone anymore. Steele handed her an envelope. This is $25,000 from our emergency fund. But more than that, we want to help you start over properly. Safe house. Good job. Whatever you need. Danny squirmed out of his father's arms and hugged Angie around the waist. Thank you for saving me. You're like a superhero, Mom. The simple words from an 8-year-old boy broke something loose in Angie's chest. All the fear, exhaustion, and desperate hope she'd been carrying alone for so long. For the first time in years, she wasn't facing the future by herself. As the crime scene was processed and statements taken, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Angie had risked everything to save a stranger's child and had somehow found herself adopted into the most unlikely family imaginable. Danny talks about you all the time now, Hammer told her as the federal agents finished their interviews. Says, you're the bravest lady he ever met. He's not wrong. The sun was rising over the Nevada desert, painting the sky pink above a parking lot full of motorcycles and federal vehicles. Angie's life had changed completely in a single night. But this was just the beginning of a transformation that would take Angie from struggling single mother to cherished family member of Nevada's most powerful brotherhood, and ultimately to finding love in the most unexpected place imaginable. Within 48 hours, Angie's life transformed completely. The Hells Angels arranged for her and her children to move into a safe house, a comfortable 3-bedroom home in a secure neighborhood where Tommy and Sarah could play outside without fear. Her abusive ex-husband Marcus made one attempt to contact her after seeing news coverage of the incident, but was quickly discouraged by a visit from Steele and 3 other bikers who explained the new protective arrangements in terms he understood completely. The federal investigation revealed that the kidnapping attempt was indeed part of a larger territorial war between motorcycle clubs, with Danny targeted specifically to send a message to his father. Angie's intervention had not only saved the child, but also provided crucial evidence that led to the arrest of 12 Scorpions members across 3 states. Local news coverage portrayed her as a hero, but the Hells Angels carefully managed media access to protect her privacy and safety. The Desert Rose Diner became temporarily famous as the place where a waitress saved a biker's son, attracting curious visitors and newfound respect for the establishment. Steele's wife, Maria Rodriguez, owned a successful catering company that provided services for corporate events, weddings, and political functions throughout Nevada. She offered Angie a management position that paid $60,000 annually with full benefits and flexible scheduling that allowed her to be present for Tommy and Sarah's school activities. The transition from waitress to business manager challenged Angie in ways she'd never experienced, but her natural organizational skills and customer service experience translated well to coordinating complex events. Within 6 months, she'd streamlined operations and increased profits by 20%, earning respect from clients who had no idea about her dramatic entry into the company. Danny and Tommy became inseparable friends, with the 8-year-old essentially adopting Angie's children as siblings. The boys attended the same school with bikers, taking turns providing security during pickup and drop-off, an arrangement that made other parents nervous initially, but proved completely safe and professional. Sarah thrived in her new environment, developing confidence and social skills in the secure neighborhood, where she could make friends without Angie constantly worrying about safety. The little girl often said she wanted to be brave like Mommy when she grew up. The chapter established a Guardian Angels program that provided protection and support for women and children escaping domestic violence, using their network and resources to create safe passages and new identities when necessary. Angie's relationship with Trust underwent a complete transformation. For the first time since her marriage, she was surrounded by people who kept their promises and followed through on commitments. The hypervigilance that had exhausted her in civilian life became an asset within the motorcycle community, where awareness and loyalty were valued qualities. Her children saw her evolve from a fearful survivor into a confident leader who commanded respect in professional settings. Tommy and Sarah learned that strength wasn't about avoiding conflict, but about standing up for others when they needed protection. Most significantly, Angie discovered that family wasn't just about blood relations. It was about people willing to risk everything for each other's safety and happiness. Sometimes courage to protect one child in danger not only saves that child, but creates an entire family bound by loyalty and love. When you stand up for others in their darkest moment, you discover that true family chooses you back, and brotherhood has no boundaries when honor is involved. Soft. In the flickering neon glow of a forgotten diner, Angela Thompson, a weary single mother scarred by abuse and endless shifts, chose courage over caution when a terrified boy pounded on her door, chased by shadows with cruel intent. With nothing but a skillet and a heart forged in survival, she stood between danger and innocence, not for glory, but because no child should face monsters alone. That single act of defiance didn't just save Danny. It shattered her isolation, drawing the thunder of 200 Harley engines and a brotherhood that crowned her their queen. From poverty's grip to a safe home, from fear to fierce love, Angie learned that true family isn't born of blood. It's forged in the fire of standing up when the world expects you to look away. Her story whispers a timeless truth. One moment of bravery can rewrite a lifetime of pain, turning victims into legends and strangers into lifelong protectors. In a world quick to scroll past suffering, Angie reminds us that heroism lives in the everyday soul who refuses to let evil win. So, what about you? Have you ever stepped into the storm to shield someone weaker? Share your story in the comments below. Let's inspire each other with real acts of courage. And if this tale moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Together, we'll keep sharing stories that prove humanity's light burns brightest in the darkest nights.